Today, I'm going to show you how I go about modeling the stand for this mechanism that we're currently calling the Drinky bird. Really needs another name, but how we go about modeling that in Fusion. And so I've got a drawing here, and it is to scale. It's a 1-to-1 scale. And I've put a bunch of question marks here for measurements because the idea is that you are responsible for deciding within the constraints and the materials you get what size and shape this thing is. So you've got a 42 by 42 by 120 millimeter long piece of pine. You can make that as tall as you like within, that 120 millimeter constraint. Same thing with these pieces of brass. So you get a certain length of brass and you can cut it down to whatever you like, right? So you should have a drawing that has all of your measurements here, and you figured out how to fit all of these holes that go into this to hold it together, how to put those all in place so that nothing crosses over in ways that it's not supposed to, so it doesn't lock the thing up. So I'm going to have this next to me on a printout, or actually the drawing, the whole time I'm modeling. And you should do the same thing too, so that you can go through and refer to your drawing and be like, oh, okay, that piece was, that measurement. Right. And the other thing that's worth thinking about is which bit do you model first? So when you've got sort of a mechanism that's got more than one part, you have to think to yourself, well, what bit do I model first? And for me, I think about it like this. I go, what's the most fundamental component to this system? And I model that first because everything else is based off that. And for me, in this instance, it's this 42 by 42 by whatever height it is block. And because that's kind of, it's got holds all the rest of the hardware. It's got all these holes in it for your sort of crankshaft, and these holes for the base screws, and to hold this piece of brass on there. So that block is really, for me, it's the most fundamental piece. Now, you could make an argument that this brass piece and the brass piece that's behind it, because there's two of them, that those are the most fundamental because they hold the mechanism, the little 3D printed part that's actually going to rock back and forth. And that would be, a reasonable argument. I'd, entertain that. And you could model that piece of brass first and then model everything else, and that would work. But for me, it's going to be the block. And I'd encourage you for this, start with a block as well. Right, I'm going to show you how I do that. So here I am. First things first, I'm going to save, just so that it's saving the whole time, and I'm not going to get into a point where my laptop runs out of battery, or this happens, or that happens, and I lose all my work. So this is where I'm keeping mine. And what am I calling it? I think I was calling it that. Cool. I'm going to save it on top of that. Sweet. So that's saved. So first things first, right, I'm going to create a sketch. And I'm going to create a sketch on the base because I'm going to draw my rectangle and bring it up because I want it to be sitting in my, CAD environment as if it's standing up on a table so that it makes sense to me as I'm designing it. So click on that face and then select a rectangle and lay out my initial shape. So 42 by 42, that's the dimension of my timber. I can't change that. And then I'm going to extrude that up by 70 millimeters. Cool, that's pretty easy. Right. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just model my base because, again, that's nice and simple. So I'll have a look at the bottom, and I'm going to create a sketch on the bottom of this rectangle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another rectangle, but I'm going to choose a center point rectangle. Right. Now, I don't trust that I can find the center point here. So first thing I will do is I will lay out a line through the middle like that, a construction line. And then I can, with my center rectangle, let me zoom in. So I can find the midpoint of that line. And because it's diagonal, I know that that's the midpoint through my design or through my block. And I want that to be 70 by 70 millimeters, right, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put some fillets around the edge. So fillets are these, curved off sort of edges. So I can click those two lines and I can get my fillet. Now I can make the fillet whatever radius I like. I like a 10 millimeter fillet for this. So that's what I'm going to do. You might want to do something different. And if you've got 10 there for your first fillet, you can actually keep clicking around and it will do the rest of them as all 10 millimeter fillets. So that's nice. And then what I want to do is I want to put in some holes for some screws. So I am going to put a 5mm hole in and another 5mm hole in. Actually, hold up. Let me just leave that there because I can just do one. And then I want to dimension these 10mm from the edge. Now, because it's moving along this diagonal, if it's 10mm from this edge, it has to be 10mm from this edge. So I don't actually have to dimension that one, right? And if I try to, it actually says, well, you got to create a driven dimension. So I don't need that. Cool. Then what I can do is instead of laying out another circle, I can actually just mirror that. So select the circle, select that as my mirror line. There we go. And now what I need to do is I need to bring this base plate, because that's what I've been modeling, down and extrude it. So I'm going to hit E, right? I want to bring that all down, and I want to bring it down by 3mm because that's how thick my material is. Now, one very important thing for modeling this mechanism is whenever you extrude two bodies and they're touching rather, they will want to join together. You can see this dialog box on my right. It says join. And so it's really important, unless you want to join those together, which if you're 3D printing a thing, that might be totally valid, right? To have them all joined together as one body. But if you're constructing them out of multiple pieces, you're going to want to go down to new body, right? And that's actually really important. So new body, click OK. And let's just check over on our left-hand side. Here we are. Here's my first body. Here's my second body. And what I can do is actually go through here and actually give these bodies a name so that it's much easier to keep track of what the heck I'm doing. And then the other thing that I want to model is I want to model these two holes going into this main block. And so what I might do is I'm just going to hide that base plate and I'll create another sketch on the bottom. So let's go back to that bottom view. Right, and I'm going to create a sketch on the bottom. Now I need to get those holes in the exact same place as my base plate. So the easiest way to do that is to unhide my base plate body, and I can hit P on my keyboard, which is project, and then I've got this selection filter, and what I'm going to select is just this hole and this hole. So these two circles there, I'm going to select those, and what that does is it brings those into my sketch. So now I know exactly where those holes are supposed to be. Now, these holes are 5mm, but the holes into my wood, I'm going to drill those at 3mm so that the screw actually bites into that timber. So do those at 3, and then hit extrude, E for extrude, and I can bring those 20mm into that block. And we can see our operation is a cut, which is actually what we want. So click OK, and there we go. So we've got those two holes. Bring the base plate back, it can come back now. Right, see those holes go all the way through. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to model the first piece of brass. So again, create sketch. I'm going to create it on this face. I might actually, let's flip it around. I'm going to put it on that front face. So I'll put it there. And then I like a center line. So I'm going to select a construction line and lay a center line down the middle. And then I've got a piece of brass. And the piece of brass is 19mm thick. And I've chosen a bit of brass that is 90mm long by 19mm wide. And I'm just going to put it there. Is it exactly in the middle? No. Does it need to be? No, because I can come along and I can dimension that off that center line. Okay, and so what's that? Well, the brass is 19mm, and I want it to be exactly in the middle. So if I go 19 divided by 2, right, then that's whatever that is, 9.5, and I get that exact spacing off there, which is really nice. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to make sure my rectangle is spaced appropriately from that top face. And for me, that is going to be 50mm. There we go. And then I am going to round the top and bottom of my brass. And so the easiest way to do that is to come in. I'm going to add another center line, or extend my center line rather, all the way to the top. And then I'm going to draw my circles. And my circle needs to be 19mm, and I'm just putting them any old location. Doesn't really matter where I put them, right? Because then I can dimension them off. And then this needs a number of holes, and it needs a 4.5mm hole at the top, and then it needs two 3.3mm holes, because those holes are going to have to be tapped for thread. So we're using an M4 metric 4 thread, and so 3.3 is the right sized hole to drill. So space that off the top by 10. That's just what I'm doing because that's what I like. I think it looks good. It's more about aesthetics. It also gives me a place to put my center line through there. Right, and then hit E for extrude again, and I can grab that and that and that and that, and I can bring it all out 3mm. Make sure that we're on new body and not join. And then I have my new body here, right? And we're going to call that brass one. Cool. And then what I'm going to do, so I could create another sketch over here and extrude another piece of brass. But what I can also do is I can just go move copy. And I can make sure create copy over here on my dialog box is checked. And then I can just move this over here like this. Now, if I select that front face and then select that, no, it's going to, because it's moving from this back edge, it's going to align with that face. But I know that if it's flush with this face and the material is 3mm thick, then all I need to do is move it another 3mm and it's in the right location. And I can click OK. Cool. Now, there is one other thing that I'm going to model with this piece of brass, and that is that on one side of this brass, I want 3.3mm holes. And on the other side of this brass, I want 4.5mm holes. So I want one hole that I can thread and one hole that I can pass the bolt straight through. And I'm actually going to do that on this one because aesthetically, I think having the screw heads on this side looks better. So I'm going to create one more sketch on this piece of brass, and I'm going to lay my 4.5mm holes over the top. And then hit E for extrude. Make sure I select both of my circles there. And I'm going to drag those through just to the edge of this block, because I also have to cut or drill a hole through this block so that I can pass the bolt all the way through. So that's where it needs to go. It's on cut. Hit OK. There we are. All right. So that's good. Now, we don't need to model the screws. I'm not trying to make life really challenging. So we don't need to model screws, right? We can just be like, oh, there's holes there and there are 4 screws. I think that's perfectly appropriate in this case. Cool. Now, what do I need? I need to pass the crankshaft through and model those 2 wooden cylinders that hold the crankshaft in place and actually form the crank and also the handle. So to do that, I'm going to first create a construction plane. And I'm going to create an offset plane off this face. And I'm just going to offset it by 0.5 mil. So 0.5 millimeters. And the reason I'm going to do that is because there's going to be a gap here. And I'm pedantic enough to want to model in that gap, right? I want to represent that there's actually, space there. It's not grinding up against the edge of that block. So I'm actually putting that in there. So that construction plane lets me create a sketch. And then I need to project, because I don't have anything I can snap to, because nothing here in bodies is actually part of my sketch because I created the sketch on that construction plane off in space. So hit P, and I'm going to project that block in there. And what I might also do is I'm going to project this and this hole. So project those in there. And what that gives me is this face, which I can snap to, but also these 2 edges of these holes. So I can actually put the crankshaft right in between those. Do I need to do that? No. Could I have the crankshaft up a little bit or down a little bit? Yeah. Would it hurt my soul every day that it's not perfectly symmetrical between these 2 points? Yes, it would. So what are we doing? Just an align. And then we are going to put a 6.5mm hole in this. 6.5. And again, we're modeling a 6.5mm hole because the wood we're using is 6mm, and the hole, it needs to turn in the hole. The hole needs to be loose enough to let that shaft turn. Right, now what I can do as well is I can just click inspect and I can just find out, okay, what's the space between these two? It's 26mm. And so I can dimension this hole. Whoop, don't want that diagonal fella. Let's get rid of that. That was just Control Z. So here, there we go. So 26 divided by 2. So halfway. It was really close anyway, but I like things to be nice. And bang that hole in there. There we are. Cool. Now I need to model the shaft of wood and the two discs and whatnot. So let's just have a look at that construction plane again and create another sketch there. And again, we need to project in. So I'm going to project in this hole. And then what I'm going to do is bring in that 6. Do I do the shaft first? No, I'm not going to model the shaft first. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually model the wooden disc first. So the wooden discs, I think they're 42mm. So they're the same width as the block. So there we go. And then we can extrude that out by, I'm just going to bring the whole solid thing out. And you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to say I'm going to use a disc that's 15mm thick. It might be a little thicker. It might be a little less thick. Have a look at the actual disc you're using and figure it out. Cool. So there's that disc. Now again, am I going to do a sketch on the other side? No, I'm going to grab that, click create copy, and I'm going to drag it over here. Make it flush with this face, right? If it's flush with that face, I know that I need to move it another 15 because that's the width of the disc. And then I need to move it another 0.5mm to give me that gap that I'm after, because I'm after a gap because look at that. Look at actually modeling things that exist in real life. That's nice. All right, cool. Now I'm going to model the piece of wood that goes through the middle. So again, create another sketch. Circle, smack bang in the middle, put a 6 in there, extrude, take that through here. Don't have it be a cut, have it be a new body. And then if you really want to be, extra attention to detail, let's give these some names. Handle disc, crank disc, crankshaft. And you'll notice if I move the crankshaft, there's no hole in these discs. If I want to model that there is in fact a hole in that disc, what I can do is come up here to the combine tool. You can find that here. And what you want to do is you want to select your target body. So I want to put a hole in this. If I want to do something to a body, that makes it the target. And the tool body, that's the thing that's going to do the thing. And what do we want to do? We want to cut. So we actually want to put a hole in that disc with that shaft. And we're going to go keep tools, because otherwise this tool, which is our crankshaft, will get deleted. So if we tick that, it will not get deleted, which is what we want. So there we go. And you can see now, if I get rid of the crankshaft, it's got a hole in it. And we can do the same thing over here. Combine, target body, tool body, cut, keep tools. Okay, there we go. So getting close now. Let's put the handle in over this side. So create another sketch. And it's again 6mm, and I'm going to put my handle 15mm from the center, and then I'm going to hit extrude. I'm going to select that circle, and this time I'm going to select two sides. And what two sides lets me do is I can move that back 15mm, and I can move this out 30mm, 25. Yeah, that's what I had. And I can model that in there. And again, options, new body. There we go. And again, we can be a little bit sort of interested in getting things really, really precise. And so we can go combine, tool body, target body, cut, keep tools. Okay, now we've got that hand on. And the last thing is the screw. So the screw is for our crankshaft. And I don't need you to model the screw, that's crazy person behavior. But I do want you to show the location of the screw. So click on that face. Again, chuck in a line. And this just needs to have a 2mm hole. And for me, the screw that forms my crank, I only want that to be 10mm from the center. And this measurement here will determine what the distance that your crankshaft, push rod, connecting rod actually moves up and down, and then how far that 3D printed part on top rocks back and forth. So let's bring that back 10mm. And there we are. Have I missed anything? Holes for screws, holes for screws, hole for screws, crank handle thing. No, I think we're all good. Sweet. All right. I'm happy with that. That has been modeled.